Bikini Bottom, there are stories untold, hidden just beneath the surface of what we know. In one of these hidden stories, there lies an alternate path, a path where fear doesn't just linger in the shadows, but consumes everything in its wake. And at the heart of this chilling tale is none other than SpongeBob SquarePants, the lovable, optimistic sponge who, in another timeline, was destined for a fate far darker than anyone could have imagined. It all began like any other Halloween in Bikini Bottom, where SpongeBob, eager to finally shed his reputation as the town's scaredy pants, took matters into his own hands. But in this version of events, something went terribly wrong. Instead of laughter and good-natured fun, this night would ignite a series of supernatural events that would alter SpongeBob's destiny forever. When the Flying Dutchman curses him, it's not just a harmless prank. It's a curse that plunges SpongeBob into a realm of fear and madness. This is the story of how one night changed everything. This is the story of SpongeBob's real Halloween nightmare. Halloween night in Bikini Bottom was always filled with excitement, candy, and scares. But for SpongeBob SquarePants, it was the one night of the year he dreaded more than anything. Year after year, he was the town's laughingstock. Scaredy Pants, they called him. It didn't matter how much he tried to muster up courage or how many costumes he put on. He was never scary enough. Tonight would be different, though. SpongeBob had a plan. "I'm sick of being the laughingstock of the Krusty Krab Halloween party, Patrick," SpongeBob declared, pacing back and forth in his pineapple house. His best friend Patrick Star looked on with a blank but encouraging expression. "I need to be terrifying." "But you are terrifying, SpongeBob. You terrified me just this morning when you burned your breakfast," Patrick added with genuine concern. SpongeBob ignored the comment and continued. "What if I dressed up as the scariest creature in Bikini Bottom? Something so spooky that no one would dare laugh at me? What if I dressed up as the Flying Dutchman?" SpongeBob's voice rose in excitement as his idea took shape. Within an hour, SpongeBob's head was shaved into a perfect, rounded, ghostly dome, and Patrick draped a simple white sheet over him. The two friends admired their handiwork in the mirror. "You look spooky," Patrick said, clearly impressed. SpongeBob grinned, his confidence growing. This time, it was going to be different. This time, they would fear him. The Krusty Krab's Halloween party was in full swing when SpongeBob and Patrick made their dramatic entrance. The lights flickered, a fog machine billowed smoke into the restaurant, and spooky sea shanties played softly in the background. Mr. Krabs, dressed as a giant gold coin, was barking at people to try his new haunted Krabby Patties. Squidward, unamused, stood in a cheap squid-shaped mask behind the register. SpongeBob approached the center of the restaurant, ready to make his big reveal. The guests turned to see him, their faces eager with curiosity. He threw off the sheet, revealing his ghostly form. "Behold, I am the Flying Dutchman," SpongeBob bellowed, waving his arms dramatically. But instead of gasps of terror, there was silence. Then, one by one, the guests started to chuckle. The chuckles turned into full-blown laughter. Even Mr. Krabs couldn't help but snort. "Nice try, SpongeBob, but you still look like a sea sponge in a bed sheet." Squidward doubled over, laughing uncontrollably. He wheezed, "you look ridiculous." SpongeBob's heart sank. The more they laughed, the more he could feel his confidence crumbling. Patrick, trying to cheer him up, whispered, "Don't worry, buddy. I think you're spooky." But it wasn't enough. The laughter echoed in SpongeBob's ears like a cruel chorus, each laugh twisting in his mind like a dagger. Just when SpongeBob thought things couldn't get worse, the lights flickered again. A gust of cold wind swept through the Krusty Krab. The laughter stopped and a thick fog rolled in. From the mist emerged a ghostly figure, the real Flying Dutchman. His glowing green eyes pierced through the smoke, and his booming voice filled the room. "Who dares mock the great Flying Dutchman on this night of fright?" he roared. The entire restaurant fell silent in terror as the Dutchman floated towards SpongeBob, who stood frozen in place. "I was just trying to be scary," SpongeBob stammered, shrinking under the ghostly pirate's gaze. The Dutchman hovered before him, eyes narrowing. "Scary? You call that scary? You're nothing but a scared little sponge. Let me show you what real fear is." And with a wave of his ghostly hand, a flash of green energy enveloped SpongeBob. His body lifted into the air, glowing and trembling, as the Dutchman's curse took hold. SpongeBob felt a surge of power course through him, and for a moment, the world went black. When SpongeBob opened his eyes, everything was different. The Krusty Krab was still there, but the laughter had stopped. His body felt lighter, his movements more fluid. He hovered a few inches above the ground, his feet no longer touching it. His voice, when he tried to speak, came out in a low, echoing whisper, sending shivers down his own spine. "SpongeBob?" Patrick asked cautiously, his wide eyes filled with fear. "What happened to you?" SpongeBob looked down at his hands, no longer soft and spongy, but semi-transparent and glowing with an eerie blue light. He had become a real ghost. Before SpongeBob could process what had happened, things around him began to change. The Krusty Krab's lights dimmed, and the soft music turned into haunting wails. Customers started to back away from him, their eyes wide with terror. What is this?" SpongeBob asked himself, his voice now laced with fear. He didn't feel in control. His emotions were fueling the supernatural energy around him, and the more scared he became, the more intense the haunting grew. The tables began to rattle, chairs floated into the air, and strange whispers echoed from the walls. Patrons screamed and fled from the Krusty Krab, running into the streets as the once jolly Halloween party turned into a nightmare. SpongeBob hovered in the middle of the chaos, helpless and confused. "Why is everyone running?" he asked Patrick, who was already hiding under a table, shaking. "Because you're scaring them, SpongeBob," Patrick whimpered. SpongeBob's heart dropped. Me? Scary? But it was true. He could see it now. His reflection in the Krusty Krab's window showed a monstrous version of himself, with glowing eyes and a twisted, ghostly form. The more he panicked, the worse it got. Objects began flying through the air, smashing into walls as if possessed by an unseen force. Unwittingly, SpongeBob had become the most terrifying creature in Bikini Bottom, and the more he tried to stop it, the more out of control his ghostly powers became. Soon, the entire town was caught in the grip of his supernatural presence. Bikini Bottom turned into a haunted wasteland. Streetlights flickered and went out. The once lively streets filled with eerie fog and distant screams. SpongeBob floated through the chaos, trying to understand what was happening to him, but each attempt only made things worse. His sadness turned to frustration, and that frustration fueled his new spectral abilities. He hovered over jellyfish fields, sending waves of dark energy rippling through the jellyfish who swarmed in confusion. Over the chum bucket, Plankton cowered as his appliances came to life, smashing into each other like they were possessed. And finally, SpongeBob found himself at Goo Lagoon, where even the waters had turned still and ominous under his influence. Patrick, terrified of his friend's newfound power, sought out the only one who could stop this, the Flying Dutchman. High above Goo Lagoon, SpongeBob faced off with his closest friends, Sandy, Squidward, and Patrick. They stood together, trembling in fear, trying to reason with him. "Please, SpongeBob," Sandy called out. "We know you're in there. You don't have to be scary. But SpongeBob's mind was fractured, caught in the grip of the curse. His floating form wavered between confusion and malice, his ghostly eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. I don't want to be scary, SpongeBob cried, but I am. I can't stop it. Just as he was about to unleash another wave of destruction, the sky darkened once more, and the Flying Dutchman appeared. The ghost pirate laughed heartily, watching SpongeBob's torment unfold. Looks like I've made you into quite the little terror, haven't I, SpongeBob? The Dutchman sneered. But there's something you haven't realized yet. The Dutchman floated down beside SpongeBob, his grin wide and malicious. With a wave of his hand, he revealed SpongeBob's true form, what lay beneath the ghostly glow. SpongeBob stared down at his reflection in the dark waters of Goo Lagoon, and what he saw horrified him. He was no longer the friendly, happy sponge he once was. His true ghostly form was grotesque, twisted with fear and anger, with hollow eyes and a monstrous shape that reflected his deepest insecurities. The Flying Dutchman cackled. You're no ghost, SpongeBob. You're just a scared little sponge underneath it all. This final humiliation pushed SpongeBob over the edge. His mind snapped, and with a blood-curdling scream, he embraced the madness. The sky above Bikini Bottom cracked open, splitting reality itself, as SpongeBob unleashed his full spectral power. The seas boiled, buildings floated into the air, and the very fabric of Bikini Bottom began to unravel. The Flying Dutchman, realizing that things had gone too far, teamed up with Patrick to stop the chaos. They devised a plan to trap SpongeBob inside a ghostly bubble, sealing him away before his powers could destroy the entire town. In a final, desperate confrontation, Patrick tearfully floated up to his friend, holding the bubble in his hands. I'm sorry, SpongeBob. I have to do this. And with one swift motion, he trapped SpongeBob inside, sealing away his ghostly powers. The sky closed, the seas calmed, and Bikini Bottom was saved, at least for now. But as the townspeople emerged from their hiding places, the haunting image of SpongeBob floating inside his bubble, still slightly mad, haunted them. His hollow eyes stared out at the world, a ghost of his former self. And somewhere in the distance, the Flying Dutchman's laughter echoed through the night, leaving everyone to wonder if SpongeBob would ever truly return to normal.